Please welcome Myra Peabody Gossens. We are thrilled to have you here, Myra. And tell us how you got here. Listening to your voice, we know you're not a native of DC. So how did you get here?
I came to DC directly from Atlanta. I came to DC to get away from the South. Somehow I thought that was the North. And just after I arrived in DC, I'll tell you about my job in a second, Jimmy Carter was elected and everybody I had known before moved to Washington. So suddenly the South traveled with me.
So you came before Carter?
I came right before Carter,
Wow.
actually in 76. Yeah,
Okay.
right before he was elected. Yeah. I had been working for Mayor Maynard Jackson, who was the first Black mayor of Atlanta, and to this day remains one of my heroes. And during the time of working for him, I met people who were running what was then the Urban Reinvestment Task Force. And it was about to become a federally funded semi-public agency called the Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation. And they hired me to be their first national communications director. So I kind of helped them stand up the organization. And it was a great opportunity to move to DC. And I've lived in DC ever since. And that's my city. Just love it.
But where have you been living in the pandemic? It's not DC, is it?
I knew you were going to bust me out on this one. Yep. So in January of 20, Charles and I moved to the Chesapeake Bay on the Magothy River, right where it flows into the Chesapeake, on a waterfront house that we were going to rent for a year to see if I liked living that far out of the city and if we could maintain our DC involvements and our Nats tickets and all the kinds of LGW things we were doing and all the other stuff in our community. And then we had been there for a month or two when the gates came down with COVID. So it turned out to be an amazing blessing to be waterfront like that in a very isolated, gorgeous glass front house. It really was a blessing. We were very safe there, and I can only say thank you for that. At the moment, though, life is just a little complicated right now. The landlords have come back for 5 months. So on May 1, we set out for a 5-month summer break. So right now I'm back in Georgia. I'm at my sister's house on Lake Lanier. We have our kayak out in the water right next to all of her other boats and water toys. Having a great time down here. We're then going to go west. We're going to spend a month in Oregon and then go to Alaska and then Northern California and then back to DC, back to that house in just outside of Annapolis on October 1. So it's kind of a crazy time, but a wonderful, wonderful event.
I like how you timed it so that you'd be back here in time for the celebration of Lyle's car in October 12th.
Absolutely.
That's very nice. Perfect timing. Your classmate.
Now more important than ever. And let me take this moment as a host committee member. I'll just get this out of the way now. If you haven't bought your tickets, now's the time to do it. If you're part of the first class, we want to buy a whole table together. See me about that afterwards. Early bird ticket prices change when, Doug?
June 11th.
June 11th. And we know we want to go honor this man, Lyles. I know you're on this wonderful event today, and you're not allowed to say anything that's self-deprecating. We want to honor you. So get your tickets now. That's my pitch, and I'll be happy to help you do that.
So let's get back to your story. You came here in 76, and then you said a few months later, all your friends from Georgia moved up here with Carter. And then, so what happened between then and when you started with LGW? I
got Potomac fever. I loved it. I just fell in love with DC. The amazing cultural activities, the energy of the city. I was less enamored of the federal scene. That was really not why I had moved up here, although the corporation I was working for, my first task was to work on the case to overturn redlining. So I was involved in the federal city, but having come from a city like Atlanta, I really wanted to be part of the local city. And I've started my own business, started a strategic communications firm in 1980. And that led me to LGW. I'm sure you're going to ask me about that, so I'll be happy to answer your question.
So how did you hear about LGW? What were your first thoughts about it, and why did you decide to apply for the first class?
I applied to the first class because I knew it was going to be really hard to get in later. I needed to go first because, and there's a story.
That's a Dana Stebbins answer, by the way. So.
Well, same answer. When I was in Atlanta working for the mayor, I was very aware of Leadership Atlanta, and it was a powerful organization. It was having a huge impact in the city at a time when the city needed all its leaders to come together. Maynard was doing that. The business community was coming together, and all the players were in Leadership Atlanta. And I was not really successful enough to achieve that status at that point. I was very young, had just come out of college, but I knew that's where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to be part of an organization like that. So when I moved to Washington, within a couple of years, I heard about Leadership Washington starting. I'm not regressing. I know it's Leadership Greater Washington, but that back then.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Washington, we're talking history here. And I was already on the board of Trade. So John Tidings and Barbara Blum came to see me and asked me would I apply. And I was so grateful. They didn't guarantee that I would get in, but they said, will you please apply? And I knew what it was going to be. So my answer is not really glib. I knew it would get harder to get in. I knew it was going to become what Leadership Atlanta had become, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I jumped really quickly. And the funny story about when I got the class list, I looked at it and I said, I'm really upset. I only know 3 people on this list. And my business partner said, isn't that the point? The whole idea is to be with people you don't know. And that's what turned out to be the case. So it was a great move on my part, but I am forever grateful to John and Barbara for coming to see me.
That is the point. When I joined LGW in 2014, I had a long career in Montgomery County, knew an awful lot of people in the region. And I'm thinking, okay, I know everybody. And I didn't know close to everybody. I mean, there's just a whole new cast of characters that I've met and fallen in love with at LGW. They're just very inspiring people. So that is the point. You're going to meet people you never would have met except for LGW. That's the exciting part of it.
And Doug, it continues. That people who I would never have met have come into my life just in the last year, even during COVID. I've gotten to know a couple of people, and 2 of them came and sat on my deck on the Magathy, masked and distanced at one point, who are very new to me, and it's all because of LGW. So that giving continues, and that enrichment it just keeps giving. It continues.
So what was your opening retreat like? What was it like going to a place where you knew 3 other people and your class was what, 40 something?
It was the perfect size. It was about 40, I think. On the way there, one of the 3 people I knew was Susan Hager, who ran a competing public relations firm. We friendly competitors. We also worked on things together. And I picked her up to drive to Annapolis to the opening retreat. And we were having such a good time that when we got to 50, I turned on 50 and went straight back downtown and to Washington. I had to turn around and go back. People have said about me, Myra's favorite thing is to be put in a room where she doesn't know anybody. And that's really true. So I walked in and there were all those strangers. And to me, that's just energy. That's all potential. Who am I going to meet? Who am I going to discover? Who's going to become something special to me, someone special to me. And the retreat was 3 days. And I must say that our class our class really had a good time. We did some hard work and we stayed out late. I'm not going to tell those stories. One of my classmates, I remember we were standing down on the city dock, probably sometime after midnight. There were 5 or 6 of us, and he convinced me that he was going to buy a boat for me. It's a very prominent person in the Washington region. I won't say who it is. It was just fun. There was just such conviviality, and yet we all knew we were there for a serious purpose. The other story I'll tell about that moment, I had been involved in Jubilee Housing for a number of years at that point. And for most of you know Jubilee Housing, but for those of you who don't, it was started almost 50 years ago to buy buildings in the Adams Morgan neighborhood and to develop them and house very low income families and provide community and support for those families. And I was quite involved in that program. And the day started, we had our first sessions, then we were gonna have lunch, and I got my plate from the buffet, walked out onto the patio, and there were lots of places to sit, but I noticed there was one table of 7 men with 1 seat available. And I thought to myself, guys, this is not good form to just huddle up over here.
They
So I went and sat
they
down.
thought they were back at the Board of Trade, Myra. That's what it was.
I think that might actually be true, Doug. Actually, if I think about who was there, yes, that was probably true. So by way of introducing myself, I said, guys, you can't do this. This is not good form. Anyway, we had a lovely lunch. And during the course of the lunch, this total stranger across the table from me named Lyle's Carr, I heard him say, I've just finished several volunteer activities and I'm looking for something new and meaningful to get involved in. And when Lyles tells the story, this is what he says. And then it was like a lamprey eel all the way across the table, attaching itself to my neck. And that was Myra, and that was Jubilee Housing, reeling me in. The truth is, to this day, Lyles is still involved in Jubilee Housing, and so am I. And there's a huge story, which we can talk about later, but that happened at the first retreat. And I did not go there looking for that. It's what happens. I call it the magic, the Leadership Greater Washington magic.
So why did you go there? What were you expecting out of that first retreat or that first class?
Well, it was still relatively new to the city. So I knew I was going to learn. I knew I was going to be able to understand better the relationships with entities in the region. No, this wasn't just a city like Atlanta was. This is the 2 states and a city. We all know that line. I knew I was going to learn about that. I knew I was going to learn about the federal relationship with the city and the region. And that was important to me because I just did not understand that. Secondly, I knew I was going to become a better citizen. I knew I was going to get to a place, this is what Leadership Washington at the time offered to me because I had seen it in Atlanta, where the right conversations were taking place. And I wanted to be part of those conversations. So I knew that was going to happen. I didn't know how, I didn't know who, I didn't know when, but I knew that's what was going to happen. I didn't go there to build my business, even though I knew that was going to happen. I didn't go there to raise money for Jubilee or anything else I was involved in, even though I knew that was going to happen. It presented such a rich place for me to be. Well worth the drive and well worth the time.
So where was the retreat?
So I went by it the other day. It's the historic hotel right on State Circle. Can't think of the name of it, but
The Maryland Inn.
The Maryland Inn. Yeah.
Maryland Inn, yeah.
And they have that lovely
downtown
patio.
Annapolis. That's great. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a very historic inn. Yeah. So we got a comment from Paul Rothenberg who said you might have said you only knew 3 people going in, but he said within 10 minutes you knew all of the class of '87. And Lori Sater said no, it was 5 minutes. It was 5 minutes. So
We had such a great class.
So Glenn Howard has a question for you. You were talking about Jubilee Housing. What is it about Jubilee that has kept you engaged all these years? I mean, that's a long, I mean, that's, if you were on there before you joined LGW, that's close to 40 years now you've been with them.
It is.
So what is it about them that you're in love with?
Thank you, Glenn, for that question. I appreciate it. It is one of the through threads of my life. And I came to Washington looking for a way to give back to the community. That's the way I was brought up. That's what I knew I wanted to do. But I had a criteria that was really important to me, and that was to work with a nonprofit organization that created community with community, not for community. I had come out of the South, a kind of paternalistic, if you will, South, the one that I grew up in, a way of giving back, but not being proximate, not being with. And about 2 years into my time with in the Jackson administration, I was out in community one evening to sort of sell some development we were going to do for the community. And I had the most beautiful presentation. I remember the city council there. It was just perfect. And this woman stood up and said to me, "You think you know what I need. You have no idea what I need. You're trying to sell me on a recreation center, and there are rats in my children's bed every night. You think I need playland and slides for my children when what I really need is food for my children and better education. You don't know what I need." And her name was Ida Williams, and it was a turning point in my life because she was right. I had no idea. I had no idea. I didn't have that experience. I did not know. I didn't understand that the interstates in downtown Atlanta, right by the stadium, had completely divided two historic Black neighborhoods, lovely neighborhoods that had been intact and were middle-class neighborhoods. The interstates and then the stadium went in, and those neighborhoods were just virtually destroyed, cut off from so many, many things. And that's where we were. I didn't know any of that. So I learned a lesson. I remember the mayor saying, "You got your head handed to you." And I said, "Well, yes, I did." And that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have that happen. And it completely changed how I related to the community. One of my prized possessions is a letter that Mrs. Williams sent me when I got the job in Atlanta, thanking me for what I was doing for community and wishing me well. I still have that.
It's
So
a
when I
very humbling experience, huh?
But perfect.
Yes,
It
yes.
needed to happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for it.
What happened to that project that you were trying to pitch?
It went ahead. There's some people on today, you may remember the Model Cities program. That's what it was. It was federal dollars put into low-income neighborhoods. It was part of the sort of the tail end of Great Society thinking. And it was terrific in so many ways. It was upgrading schools. But at that moment in her life, she hadn't been a participant at all in determining what was going to happen to her and her neighborhood. And I don't think, by the way, that we've gotten that right yet. I don't think and I don't mean white Southern females, I mean society hasn't gotten it right yet. We haven't figured out how to create truly with across all kinds of divides. That's still very, very, very alive in me. So anyway, when I came, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
When I came to DC, I wanted to find a place a volunteer effort where that could happen. And again, thanks to John Tidings and the Board of Trade and me being a very sort of active member on the board of the Board of Trade, back when women business owners were just beginning to be invited into that organization. Jim Rouse, the developer, was very involved with the Church of the Savior and Jubilee Housing. And he sent his emissary to ask John Tidings, who would be good to help bring the business community into Jubilee Housing. And John Tidings said, Myra Peabody.
Wow.
So Jim Rouse came to see me and took me on a tour of what they were doing. And the tour was with community. The residents of the buildings and the staff and the board members all were part of my tour. It wasn't just what we used to see all the time, a bus tour with the windows rolled up where you just looked at something in passing. And it struck me that this was an organization that really at least was trying it. If not had it right, they were at least trying it. So in 1982, I agreed to help bring the business community into Jubilee Housing. And Lyles and so many others, I told, when Beverly Hudnut did my history interview, I said to her, I can name 20 or maybe even 30 people in LGW who have been huge parts of Jubilee Housing. And it's a great story to tell because it has to do with our impact. Alex Orfinger is the chair of the board right now. Jim Knight's been through the program. The CEO, Rebecca Ely, is in the class this year, vice president at Jubilee. Numerous board members, but my favorite connection between Jubilee Housing and LGW, Doug, is 2 years ago, Teresa Atta was in the class. Mm-hmm. And Teresa is this amazing young woman who has started two nonprofits, has a great career, went to Brown, went to NCS, and grew up in Jubilee Housing. And she tells that story and is so proud of it. And I wouldn't know her if her mother, Margaret Wanjui, hadn't been on the board with me at Jubilee Housing all those years. Wow. So it's just a great, intersectionality is amazing. It's a great story about impact. It's the promise fulfilled for me. I knew something was going to happen. And when I tell that story, to me, that is the fulfilled promise.
I love the way you described it as sort of developing with the community as opposed to for the community. That's very hard to do. Scott Crass with the 11th Street Bridge, I think, is doing a great job of that. Mm-hmm. We worked very hard to do that in downtown Silver Spring. We revitalized that, but there were ups and downs all the way through. It's very, very tough to do. So I'm glad that Jubilee Housing is mastering that and moving forward.
Well, I'm not sure that's the word I would use. We're struggling through it along with a lot of other people. And yeah, it's finding what's mutual in all of us. Finding that mutuality. And I love that word. We are all at some level the same. We want the same things. We have the same desires. We have the same capabilities. It's all within us. All we need to do is get the obstacles out of the way that are in the way of people thriving. And if we think those people in power, and I'll put myself there just because I'm white and privileged, if we think we can remove the obstacles and that we know what to do, just like Ms. Williams said to me in what that probably was 1973 or 4, we're not going to get it right. So we're looking for bringing that mutuality out and finding it and then building on it. So I even go so far sometimes as to have a little bit of hope that if the country can do that, that maybe we won't sit around talking about how divided we are. If we can find that mutuality, for want of a better word.
What you need, though, are people who have that at the beginning, who have that intent and purpose at the beginning. Because if you're not looking for that, you're never going to find it. But if you start with it,
That's right.
sometimes you do it, sometimes you don't, but at least you're still trying to do it
Yep.
the whole way. So.
That's right.
So tell us more about your first year. So you had the opening retreat, everybody hit it off. There was a lot of wild partying, it sounds like. And
No wild
what happened
partying.
through the rest of the year?
I did not say there was wild partying.
I
was not there. That was not us. All right, guys,
Okay.
be quiet. Because Leadership Washington at the time, and I assume still now as LGW, Lori, be quiet.
She is begging to differ with you, by the way.
Just so that she knows too much.
Hey, Myra, by the way, you could say Leadership Washington. We don't find people anymore for leaving the word greater out. That ended a long time ago. So. Yeah,
but I actually really like the name Leadership Greater Washington. I just think that says it so much better. So only when I'm talking historically do I say Leadership Washington.
Okay.
The class days were very experiential. There was a whole lot of riding around with community police and going up to crime scenes and meeting with a lot of powerful folks who were making decisions. But the day that stands out for me was the day that we had a unique assignment. And my assignment was to apply for a job at a hotel in Landmark, Virginia at 9 o'clock, and it was as a housekeeper job. And I had to leave to go apply for that job from Anacostia. That was all I was told. I had to leave from there, and I had to use public transportation, and I had to apply for the job, and I had to get the job. So I was kind of glib when I got that assignment, like, yeah, they're just going to teach me that it's, hard to get that job, or maybe I wouldn't want it or something like that. I had no idea what the ripple effect was going to be. I had a 1.5-year-old at the time. My husband was out of town. My nanny was homesick with her young child. And my business partner from Alexandria had to drive to my house in Chevy Chase, DC at 5 o'clock in the morning for me to leave to drive over to Anacostia and then take public transportation to Landmark, Virginia. And when I did all that, and it was a long time, and I spent a lot of money. I was very aware of what I was paying to park and what I was paying to ride the bus and the metro and what have you. And the connections didn't work very well. I got there, I was on time, but the interviewer, the HR person, kept me waiting for maybe half an hour. And that kind of, seriously, you're keeping me waiting, and after all this, and all I'm doing is applying for a housekeeper job. So all my privilege kicked in, and I didn't call it that then, but I was just annoyed by the whole thing. And then they told me what I was going to get paid, which was pittance. I don't even know if it was minimum wage, and it was part-time, and it was cleaning hotel rooms. And the hours were atrocious. They wouldn't work with my family situation at all. And then I had to do the reverse trip. And then I had to get my car. And then I had to go to the LGW luncheon for our program day. And by the time I got to that luncheon, as some folks who were there will attest, I was fried. I was out of sorts. And again, I had learned, I didn't know what the lesson was at the time. I was just kind of ticked off about the whole thing. But I remember Carmen Turner was head of Metro at the time, and she was there. She was on the board, and she was at that luncheon, and she heard me describing it. And I remember her kind of smug look, like, yep, this was a good thing. This was a really good thing. And I've continued to learn lessons from that experience. It has made me more empathetic. It's made me more conscious, even when I was running my own company before I sold it, about hiring and where people lived and what we needed to pay for public transportation and what we needed to do to help people be flexible with hours and all those kinds of things. So it had a lot of impact on me in a way that I wasn't expected and kind of didn't want. I was like, I don't need this. I got this. Wrong. So it was those kind of experiences that actually kept me involved too, Doug, because after that, as you know, I stayed around and I'm still around, and I continue to look for those great experiences.
Well, I got to say that's another great thing about LGW is these moments that really transform your life that you're not expecting, you're not looking for. I mean, you went into that saying, "Oh, I'll just do this stupid little exercise and get it over with and come to lunch," and it really had a big impact on your life, and you're still talking about it 35 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and importantly, I'm still talking about the ones that happened 2 years ago or 3 years ago,
Yep.
a year ago. And the bookend story to that one is happened just last summer during the worst of the COVID epidemic. Some of us who are together on a regular basis once a month, a group that was formed after the racial equity table series, the first series that LGW did with the RAG. We discovered that one of our friends in that group was really seriously affected by COVID. He didn't actually have COVID, but he had 2 jobs. He lost both jobs. He lost his housing. He had family members who were quite ill and couldn't help him. And very quietly, that group, without even really, only 3 of us knew who that person was. That group came together and found housing and got him a car and helped him find a job.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that's an LGW story that doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be publicized, if you will. It's just what happens. And I think so much of that comes from the empathy that one gains when you go through the class and you have all these experiences and you learn about other people and learn from other people. And then also the caring that happens when there's a trust level. I've mentioned this to you before, Doug. I think the number one word that I use about LGW is trust. There's a level of trust in this organization amongst the members and the alumni that I don't think you find elsewhere. I know I can start a conversation and at least I might get a little bit of the benefit of the doubt at the beginning if somebody knows I'm an LGW graduate. We can do just about anything. It's amazing.
So let's continue through your class year and go to the closing retreat. And Lyle's car wrote something about a phone booth. I don't know what that means. Does that make any sense?
You know, no idea what he's talking about.
Okay.
I'm not looking at the chats.
So you're going to your closing retreat. You're going through that. At that point, did you say, "Hey, this is something I want to do or be involved with for quite some time," or what were your thoughts when you graduated?
Well, first of all, I was pregnant. So I was about to have my second child. My son called me the other day about this interview and he said, weren't you pregnant at the end of that? And I said, yeah, with you. And he said, all I know is I grew up not knowing the difference for a long time between Jubilee Housing and Leadership Washington. I just knew you were out. You were out doing something in community. Honestly, I don't have many memories of the closing retreat. I do have memories of the fact that our class was asked by the founding leaders to help transition Leadership Washington into its own entity, to help wean it from the Board of Trade and the Junior League, to help transition the board from solely being founders and outside business people to alumni taking over the board. And because I've sort of always been that person, okay, it's time to go on the board, now it's time to chair the board, whatever somebody needs. that was what interested me. That's what I do for a living as a chief strategy officer, is I help organizations and companies evolve. And I help with transitions. And when I was asked to go on the board, I didn't know why, but once I sat down as part of the board, I figured it out really quickly. This is about evolution. It's about organizational maturity and transition. And that's what we did. And it was certainly not just me. It was Ed Norton, it was Lyles, it was Julie Rogers, it was Artis, it was Pat, just a lot of folks from the first and second class.
So how have we evolved over these 35 years? You were there at the beginning, and what do you think? How do you think we've evolved or transitioned? And then where do you think we should be going in the next 35 years?
Love those questions. I love those questions. On the first one, not just numbers, not just the sheer critical mass of people, but the web that we've created. I think of it as this kind of intricate web of people throughout the region who are not only knowledgeable about the region, but are connected. That is, obviously when we started, that was the promise of the program, and it's actually happened. So that's a huge difference. And I know you all are, I love the Pinky and Mahan and Rachel's leadership around impact. And you talk so much, Doug, about impact. And I believe we've had it and we are having it because of that web. That's a big change. Another change is that a lot of people who went through the program in the early years are really now the movers and shakers. They are the CEOs. They are in charge. They are really doing great things. I think about the mayors and the members of the city council and the county executives like yourself, and just making a huge difference. And then the other way it's changed, we were really siloed for the first, we were siloed by classes. I don't know if we ever should have named our classes, because we were always friendly competition. Our class was better, and ours really was. So I'll just get that out of the way now. We set the bar so high. But we were siloed, and we continued to churn through the next year and then churn through the next year. It was when the strategy looked at how do we bring people together regardless of their class year, and it doesn't matter. How do we get people together around things the region needs? Looking at racial equity, looking at racism. How do we bring people together for fun? How do we bring people together to create new alliances and new partnerships? And once that began happening, I think LGW really took off. And I'm painting the picture as if it was some kind of smooth, the airplane started rolling and then it took off, and we've been flying ever since. And all of us on this call know better than that. It has been a bumpy ride. The difference to me is that we're really poised now. And this is the thing that I really want to talk about, is your second question. Where are we going? What's next? I just finished, once you pass 65, by the way, you can take any class at Georgetown University from any professor for about $50 as a senior auditor. So I've now taken 5 classes at Georgetown, and you're in the class, you're participating in the class, you're with all the kids, you don't have to do the assignments, but you're a full member of the breakout groups, the essay, everything is just fabulous. And the learning for me, because I'm a lifelong seeker, I'm always wanting to learn, is from the kids in the class. The professors are great, subject matter is great, the reading's great, but it's the kids and seeing things through their eyes. And I say that because as you all look at the future of LGW, and I'm happy to say that I've done my strategy parts, I've been part of strategic planning numerous times. You are in great hands. I'm happy not to be at the table. I am so excited about where this organization is going. We're poised for even greater things. And I have some ideas, happy to contribute them.
Oh, we will ask, don't you worry about that. So, but you're right. I really view my job in many ways as connecting the current class with the other 1,900 members of the organization, the other 1,900 members who've been through a class, as opposed to you're in your class, you know those people, and you're on your own. It's how do we get those cross-class connections going? And I think that's an extremely valuable part of Leadership Greater Washington. And if we didn't do that, it'd be such a waste, because there's this huge, that you call the web out there, of people who know things, know people, whatever, that you can tap into.
Yeah.
Through the 35 years of LGW, not just your class year.
Yeah. It's just great.
So I want to transfer a little bit here, because I know you've had a very distinguished career, but I want to ask you about leadership and leadership lessons that you've learned from others. And are there any particular leaders that you want to sort of highlight for us and say why you think it's important to highlight them?
Oh, I'd love to do that. Yes. It's interesting because as a consultant, I am supposed to be the guide. I'm supposed to be the analyst of context and helping people find their pathways forward. And I love to do that. And I think I'm pretty good at it and have enjoyed it a lot. In fact, a former client called me this morning and said, I just want you to know we achieved all 3 of the goals we set 2 years ago with you. And I'm like, oh my God, that makes me feel so good. Right. It was really great. But I also have learned so much. I just soak in examples and wisdom from other people. And I probably would mention 3 leaders who have impacted my life. I would normally start with Maynard Jackson, but I've already talked about him a little bit. So let me just mention that in that time frame, and because I was working for him, I got to know Coretta Scott King. And this was about 5 years after Dr. King had been killed. And this woman said to me and to others around her, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to start the King Center for Social Change. I'm going to have his birthday become a national holiday. I don't want people focused on the day he died. I want people focused on the day he was born. And I'm going to have a statue of him made for the National Mall. And she put her blinders on, and that's what she did, of course, with a lot of other people. And it is not easy as I was making it sound. But I learned so much from her. Women in the civil rights movement, it was a difficult time. Her position was difficult, but that's what she did. And I think she was the most visionary person I have ever worked for. And I was just a volunteer, did a lot of stuff with her around getting the King Center funded, and just as a volunteer. Quite a visionary, quite determined, and the woman who had amazing courage. The second person who has influenced me on the leadership side is Dr. I. King Jordan, who was the first deaf president of Gallaudet. My PR firm handled the 1988 student takeover when the whole campus was shut down, and the incoming hearing president, who was a wonderful woman, was ousted, and the hearing board chair was ousted, and Dr. Jordan was named president, and Phil Braven became the first deaf president of Gallaudet. And it's very unusual for a consultant who comes in with a previous group to be retained with the new group. But somehow we managed to keep that continuity. And what I learned from him was a lesson of empathy. He could lead Gallaudet because he was deaf. He is deaf. He's an LGW graduate too.
Yes, yes.
We did those networking, pure networking. He could take that institution to new levels because of that empathy that he had, which had never existed before. I'm not saying the previous leadership was inept or insensitive or what have you, but they weren't deaf. And it made a difference. It made a huge difference. So courage for Mrs. King and empathy for Dr. Jordan. And then the third one is really one of our own, and that's Julie Rogers. I miss her. She's in Boulder. I'm hoping she's coming back for the gala. Probably call her later this afternoon and tell her I said that. And when I first I first got to know her through LGW, and she was in the second class, and then we were on the board together, and we went through a lot of the transitions together. Then she hired me to be sort of her strategic guide as she moved the Myra Foundation into whole new territories. And this woman she had the ability to see what community needed in a way that the foundation community never really had before. And she set the Myra Foundation up as a leader in that way. She broke new ground. I'm sorry, I'm speaking jargon. Let me think of an example. She began to fund small, unknown startups, nonprofit startups. Nobody had done that. The funding was by and large at the established nonprofit level. And she began to find these in-community, community-led nonprofits. And soon the funding community went in that direction too. So she was someone who was willing to take risk and break new ground. And I learned so much from her. And then when I think about where Myra is today and what Nikki has done with that organization, based on that solid foundation, it's the continuity of leadership. When you set the foundation right, the next series of leaders really, really, really can build on what we have. So those are three I would name. I could talk about Robert Redford. I did work for Sundance for 3 years, but that would just be a little too celebrity oriented, although it was a really great experience.
I'm sure the stories of Robert Redford are like the ones from your class year. You're not allowed to talk about them. So.
Well, one doesn't. One doesn't. I will say the most intimidating part of that was you have to call him Bob.
Wow.
And I didn't grow up in a movie star environment. I mean, I was in Washington, so I was used to meeting all kind of famous people, but not sitting down with them one-on-one and saying, well, Bob, what do you think we should do about this board issue? Like, this is Robert Redford.
So thank you for those stories about leaders that have inspired you. So courage and vision with Coretta Scott King, empathy with King Jordan, excuse me, and continuity / take risks with Julie. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Are there any moments you want to share of the last year through the pandemic that LGW has helped you, or LGW members have helped you, or you reach out to them, or they reach out to you?
Yeah. So I'm not going to say exactly how this happened because I don't. Most of my work is behind the scenes. I'm usually in closed doors with leadership teams. I think Alex once said Alex, who's been a client many times, once said he was going to get all my clients together in one room so we could better understand what it is I do. And I said, well, first of all, I'll be not at that meeting. I'm not going to be anywhere near that meeting. And secondly, please don't. Because it's hard to talk about. But I was working with a client this past year who, as many organizations and corporations experienced after, I think the way it's talked about now is after the Ahmaud Arbery killings and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, so many entities issued statements and then began or didn't a racial equity journey. So I was called in to help a national organization with that, not as a racial equity consultant, because I am not that, but as the strategic person who could help lead this organization and guide this organization toward embracing this racial equity journey. And I needed a lot of help with that. There was not exactly resistance, but there was a lot of, I had a sense that maybe people thought it would just go away, that it would be another time where white people paid a lot of attention, and then once everything kind of settled down, you know, maybe Biden will be elected and it'll all be fine again. My biggest challenge was to keep that from happening. And I turned to people I know, people who are in my life because of LGW. And I could, with confidence, because they trust me and I trust them, ask for advice for me. Never quoted them, never made any of it transparent. But it was there and it was quite real. And in both instances, and one of them was quite volatile, actually, having to do with people who were fired inside an organization. I got amazing coaching for me. And I can call it that. I can say they coached me in a wonderful way. And that's that trust I was talking about. It was the establishment of that trust. And the people I'm referring to are not from my class and are people I've gotten to know only in the last 2 or 3 years. I know that's a little oblique, but.
Those are the people you were having drinks with on your deck? That's another story.
That's another story.
Okay.
Yep. No, that one actually was just for fun. We actually got together one Saturday afternoon just for fun.
So Beverly Hudnut's got a question for you. If you could think of the next big meaningful project you get involved with, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, not till October 1.
Yes.
I'm practicing saying that.
Well, not till October 12th through Lyle's celebration.
There you go. Right. But I'm going to be rehoused again October 1 and can think about that. I'm practicing not taking on any projects right now. Actually, if I can answer that, Beverly, in a slightly different way, I'd like to finish my novel. I've been working on a novel for probably 8 or 9 years. And what I want to do is finish writing my novel. I've had it looked at. Apparently it's worth pursuing. And that's what I want to do. I'm also practicing saying that.
Well, give us some details. What's it about? Can't leave us hanging.
It's about family secrets, and it's about a mother-daughter relationship where the mother knows information that the daughter doesn't know, and the daughter knows that there's something she should know but doesn't want to know it. How's that?
I'm ready to buy it right now, Myra.
It's also about the mother who dies, but actually won't leave the earth until she has imparted this knowledge to her daughter. So there is a ghost, I guess, part of it, but more in the sense of Toni Morrison's character and Beloved herself, of that being. It's based on something that actually happened in my small town in South Georgia, a murder that happened, and that's the reality of the core of the story. But the rest of the novel is just fiction and has been playing out in me. That I'm going to sound crazy, sorry, but the characters live inside me, and occasionally they say things and do things that I have to go write down, and apparently that's part of the process. So.
Well, Myra, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your work on behalf of Leadership Greater Washington, Jubilee Housing, and everything else that you've been doing over these past many, many years. I adore you, Myra. I love this conversation.
Thank you.
I love this conversation. We could go on forever. It's just such a pleasure to talk with you. And I will give you the final word.
I really appreciate this time. Doug, I want to say to you and Debbie and Rebecca and Duran, and I'm going to forget everybody else's names.
Jay and Danny.
Jay and Danny. where you all have taken this organization is extraordinary to me. And I do feel it's poised for even further evolution and greatness. And that's so exciting to me. And I'm here. I want to be involved. I'm going to be involved. And I want you to know that I'm here to help in any way I can. And that goes for you too, Mahan and Rachel, if you're out there. Thank you so much. This has been great fun.
Myra, thank you. We've got a survey for people to fill out. Please take a look at that. That's in the chat, and give us your feedback on this. And it has been it's been a great afternoon, Myra. I can't thank you enough. And I will be hounding you about finishing your novel every time I see you now. I can't wait to read it. Can't wait to read it.
Great.
All right, Myra. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all. I want to thank PNC Bank for sponsoring these Frontline Conversations. And please stay tuned for our next program. Thank you. Thank you, Myra. Wonderful.
Take care.